All right, what's up, guys? Stephen Guadani here with 5 Tool Sports Science. We got Sean. We got him doing his med ball drills. We also got some loaded band drills and a sled drive drill in this video, so we're going to review all of them. So this is going to be his shuffle throw here. Shoot, here we go. Gotta play it slow. It gets all jumpy. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so Sean, same thing. Gotta get more into the hip. So this is what the loaded band drills. We're gonna go over it a lot, but we got to get sitting into this hip more, sitting lower center of gravity. All right, and then holding torsion. So as we go forward. All right, this is, I think, right before front foot strike here. All right, this back leg just hasn't done much. All right, so you're about to hit front foot strike, and you just haven't been able to drive, produce force, power this hip rotation around. All right, I think your trunk position's in a better position. You're not early trunk tilting. Here's front foot strike. All right, so this is when we get to the sled drives, you'll see this a lot more. Your back leg is just missing. It's kind of just rolling into that front foot strike. So you're not really loading and driving and producing force that well from the back leg. It's just kind of rolling over. So you're hitting foot strike here, and the ankle's kicked through. The hip looks to be in somewhat decent position, but there's just no energy behind that. There's no power behind it because there was no load and drive from the ground to power that hip rotation open. It's this front side kind of just pulling you open. So you're hitting front foot strike here in a pretty decent position. Shoulders are in a good position, hips are somewhat through, but there's just not enough power through this back leg drive. All right. So then going forward, front leg extension looks a lot better here. Trunk is still a little vertical, but the big thing is just going to be working on that back leg drive. So more of those band drills, more of those sled drives, which we review. I think that'll help you a lot. All right, next drill, side to sides. All right, so same thing. This front side's getting a little aggressive. You can see this back leg starting to lose torsion, kind of just starting to collapse in. Still not in that great of flexion of the hip. All right, so here's front foot strike. All right, now back hip is, or the ankles isn't kicked through, so this back hip is going to be late. So you're landing here, pelvis closed. Shoulders are in a good position. A little bit of early trunk tilt, but still it's just the same thing. We just got to get better at loading, driving, powering through that hip. That's going to be the key, because this hip powering open is what powers the kinematic sequence. It's the first link. So the more that you can peak and power this hip rotation, the more that the trunk rotation is going to peak off of it, and then the ball, the external rotation of the throwing arm, and then into the ball. All right, so it's the chain of energy from the hip, then transfers through hip to shoulder separation, and then trunk rotation, and then finally external rotation of the throwing arm into the ball. That's the kinematic sequence of energy. So right now we're just struggling to get that hip to power that kinematic sequence. All right, let's see what happens at ball release here. So ball release, yeah. So I like your front leg extension. It looks like it's getting better. Forward trunk tilt was a little better on this throw than on your last throw, but it's still pretty vertical. So I think it's going to just be, as you get better at driving and powering the front leg and getting that linear power, the more that this trunk is going to want to shoot forward over the front leg. I think you do a good job off the front leg. The weak point is definitely just the back leg drive. All right, here's your chest up throw. Yeah, and let's get to that. Come on, right at that ball release. just missed it. But that's great. Forward trunk tilt, front leg extension. So that's good. We just got to get to that back hip, and you'll see when we get to the banded throws and the sled drives, you're really going to see where you're struggling with it in terms of loading it and then being able to drive it. The bands and the sled drive resistance is really making those weaknesses apparent. So I think just working on those a lot more, getting better at those, is going to help it a lot. All right, we're going to see in the sled drive, same kind of thing we're seeing out of the back leg. Now we're just adding resistance to the drive leg, and you can see how much you're really relying on front leg momentum here. So coming out of leg lift, all right, same thing with this back leg. Look how it's almost identical to what we're seeing in the banded drills. Got to preset, hold torsion a little bit better in the back leg, sit into more flexion of the hip. Let's see what happens as you go forward. You're just opening up this front side. All right, so look at all that front leg swing. You can see this front leg just opening up. Back leg isn't really doing much to load here. Going forward. So front leg is still swinging. You can see how blurred it is. So when it's really blurred like that, that means that you're swinging it fast. You're really trying to rely on that momentum to pull you rather than loading into this drive leg. You can see this knee starting to collapse, not a lot of flexion in the hip. All right, so the front side's flying open. This back leg is kind of just rolling over, collapsing. All right, so in here you're almost at foot strike. All right, and the heel's coming up at this point, but the leg is just rolled over. You're kind of just spinning it internally, and there's no force, there's no drive from the ground. It was just this momentum kind of flying open, and then this back leg is rolled over. All right, so there's foot strike, and you can see you're way leaked out in front. So this is a huge drill. This is going to be great, combining that banded drills, working on the load position to where you can get yourself into a better load position, and then bringing it right into a sled drill where you're using resistance to work on the drive leg, because this is just highlighting your weakness. You're just having a hard time of loading into the back leg and then driving and producing force. You're relying too much on this momentum and front side swing to get your hips open, and it's got to be holding torsion, more flexion in the hip, and then powering from the ground to drive that sled, to accelerate your body, accelerate your hips open. All right. All right, Sean. This is a good one to see how much flexion you're sitting into the back hip. So when you're lifting and loading here, I want to see you sit even farther back. You can really do that with this band. So you're sitting back, but I want to see you get your hips even farther down. So your hips are there. I'd like to see them get down farther. That would be sitting into more flexion. So you can really use that band to feel yourself get uncomfortably low initially. So that's really all you're going to see from this view. We're going to see a lot more when we go from the side view, but that's what I want to see. When you have the band this way, the idea of it is to feel yourself get low. Sit into that back hip. Sit into your posterior chain, sit and get deep into that hip, which is what you struggle to do. So utilizing this going forward, feel yourself getting awkwardly low, like really low to the point where you could like reach down and touch the ground almost. I want you to overemphasize that feeling. And then from the side, we can see this is what we're seeing in the drills too, in the mid ball throws. You got to do a better job here of screwing this back leg into the ground, presetting into torsion. I don't think you're presetting into torsion, so when you lift and you start moving those hips down the mound, that back leg just kind of just collapses in. All right, so ideally, preset this knee into torsion, hold torsion through this hip and this knee better, and you got to ride these hips forward and down. So you really got to sit. Same thing with this one. Sit into that back hip. So go from that last drill where you're using the band to awkwardly feel yourself, sit into that back hip, and you kind of have to add that into this. So you really got to sit into that back hip, keep torsion in the leg, and load it into the load position. So this is if this was your load position here, not, oops, 1 second, try to pause it. I want to get it right at the, come on. All right, so if this is your load position, that's not a good load position. You're pulled out of the flexion of the hip. This knee is still collapsing in. So ideally you would want more torsion, you know, your knee more held in torsion, more flexion of the hip over here, and just sitting into that back leg. That just looks like your normal drive leg position. All right, so really use this drill to work on getting yourself into a better back leg load position, which is, you know, the force vector is good. I like this force vector. That's a great force vector, but you just need more torsion and you need to be sitting deeper into flexion of the hip. So really use this drill to work on those two components and then try to bring those into your med ball drills.